We like to shine a light on issues that the general population of the United States just don't get from mainstream media. And so I was wondering if you could just break down a little bit of the U.S. History with Haiti, and if you could put this assassination into some context for listeners and viewers.
Thank you very much again for giving me this opportunity. And I think that the American viewers deserve to have an in-depth understanding as to what is happening, because in the mainstream media, the way they treat this, they treat it as an event on its own, as if there is no history, there is no process, and Haiti is a troubled country. Each time that you hear from about Haiti, it's about misery, poverty, and violence. So this is what you see. But behind what you see, you have much more than that is going on. We will remember that Haiti was controlled by the United Nations for more than 15 years after the coup d'etat against Aristide. So from 2015 until 2019, MINUSTA was the sole power that which mission was to help Haiti organize its institutions, organize its security institutions, its rule of law institutions, in a way so that democracy and democratic politics can be possible, and also in a way so that the human life can be protected, and a market can be created, and prosperity can be advanced, and human development can be possible. MINUSPA spent 15 years in Haiti. When they left Haiti without any of these institutions they were supposed to help us build. And then what they left us with MINUJUS, which is a new version of United Nations MINUSTA. That new version, the objective of that new version and the mandate of this new version was to help Haiti strengthen his rule of law apparatus. That means its justice system, its prison system, and it's all the judiciary processes, so that rule of law can exist and Haitians can have access to justice. Again, until today, MINUJUS is in Haiti, and you can see a series of events that have been happening without any serious interventions or commentary from the international community on the state of the situation in Haiti. So what you have here, you have under the eyes of all the Western powers, including the United States, during the latter 2 to 3 years, we have a government that has been governing by decree, that have been destabilizing most of the key institutions that will serve as balance of power within the country. For example, we no longer have a parliament. Nobody said anything. We no longer have a judiciary. No longer said anything. The president of the Supreme Court in Haiti, died about 2 or 3 weeks ago of COVID. It was not replaced, and there is no process for that. And the prime minister that we have, in fact, we don't have just one prime minister. You may hear that we're having competing prime ministers because they have named another acting prime minister, 2 days or 3 days ago, and now the president is dead, assassinated, and you have an acting prime minister that is not an acting prime minister, and one that has been promised to be prime minister, nominated, but hasn't been sworn in. So the situation we are in is a situation in which that rule of law has been destabilized, and corruption has been destabilized, and all of this under the noise of a international community, United Nations, the United States, Canada. So what happens with the death of the president, it may be shocking, but it's not a surprise, because we already knew during the last 2 years, and particularly during the last 3 months, there was a buildup of gangs, a fragmentation of society, constant use of gang in politics to attack enemies. And when I say that, I'm not talking just about, the criminal gangs that are acting out just because they are acting out. I'm talking about politicians, including those who are in government and outside of government, using gangs as political arguments, as political tools in order for them to achieve their objective. So what I'm saying here is something systemic that has gangrened Haiti, the Haitian society. And beside that, you have also in the market sector, in the private sector, Each of the big families in Haiti, they have a gang. They have a gang. When there is a competition, they send the gang after you.
Wow.
When they want to attack somebody who wants to bring a new idea, they send somebody to kill you. So Haiti has been like that. Why? Because we have been taken in charge by the international community, and as if you were taking in charge a baby, and what they left after they stayed in the country for all these years is just that empty promises with institutions that are incapable of fulfilling its prophecy, what they were supposed to do. So the problem that we have with the killing of the president is not just an accidental killing. It's not just because Haiti is violent. Haiti doesn't know how to govern itself. Is that there is a culture, there is an infrastructure that maintains that violence in Haiti. And it is supported by the international community. If it is not supported actively, it is supported by their silences, because all these things were happening, and they keep saying, you have to respect the legitimacy of the government, you have to have new elections, yet the situation of gang violence may put people in a position in which everybody is sheltered at home.
Professor, what we always try to do, especially with sort of international stories, is to try to get an idea of why America and why Americans need to think about what's happening in Haiti and the importance of that. So can you just talk about that, and maybe briefly, if you could just talk about the history, where obviously you had the Haitian Revolution, and there at the same time you had potential slave results happening in the United States, but there was efforts to suppress that the Haitian news. So so the slaves in this country wouldn't exercise their powers and revolt. Can you just talk about some of that?
Yes, and then so all of these have their roots very deep in history. And as you know, Haiti is a product of the colonial history and slavery, plantation society, with an extraordinary hell context for Haitians, for the slaves. When Haiti became independent, when Haiti organized the revolution, it wasn't a revolt, it was a revolution. And they organized the revolutions in order to not just proclaim that Haiti was independent, from bondage and slavery, but humankind, wherever you are, wherever you live, you should be free. You should be able to imagine the future, think about your daily life, provide for who depends on you, and then think about the future in a way that you can, leave your positive mark on earth. When Haiti took his freedom, we had the revolution. It was a huge challenge for the United States and all the Western powers. But let's face it, a revolution has happened. Nobody, no power from outside has, remote control access over what was going on in the revolution. A population that has been kept under bondage now is creating the path for liberation for its own people, for its own, to take itself in charge and to think about the possibility of having a sovereign nation, a sovereign society. This has scared the hell out of all the power in the world. Great Britain which was a global empire. The United States was a slave empire. Well, it wasn't an empire yet, but it was emerging, as a new slave, esclavagist country. And Europe, all those countries, including Latin American countries, saw in the revolution a challenge. So what was happening since the revolution in 1804 was that all the international politics have been to contain Haiti first. That means that to prevent a spillover of the revolution from Haiti to Latin America, from Haiti to the Caribbean, from Haiti to the United States. That's the first thing. Because here too, we were having enslaved individuals, enslaved people, and the plantation, narrative and plantation structure was what maintained, the whole foundations of American society. So they have to prevent that. Second, they had to show that Haiti's governance will never be something that will be fulfilled. Why? Because if Haiti can govern itself, that would mean that Black Americans also can take their own freedom and they can, call for self-governance. Countries in Africa can also claim for self-governance, can talk about sovereignty. Other countries under subjugations can do that. So the Western powers, it's not just a United States issue. The Western powers, they organize a systematic and a kind of concerted effort to knock out all positive effort of governance that would come out of Haiti, because it will be a bad example. And then they have to show the world that these niggers, between quote, do not know how to govern, and therefore they are not deemed to civilization, and they cannot claim, the same right as a white person, a Euro person can claim, and then they are the one to rule us, not us to rule ourselves. So now, this would be a simple story if it was just the foreigners preventing Haiti from building a society. Unfortunately, the way domination works is that it trickles down through a series, layers of people who have benefited from the system, including blacks themselves who became free, including people who became the people who invested in the state, who control the state. So what Haiti has done, those who have been able to control the state claim that they are the people who carry the legacies of civilization, the legacies of Western Europe, the legacies, of the colonizer. So they become colonizers of their own people.
Wow.
So Haitian's governance, since the beginning, Haitian governance that was, codified through the state, was a governance that was against the nation. You have the nation in one way, you have the state in one way. And the state's challenge in Haiti has always been to find ways to continue to maintain the subjugation of those who were former slaves. And as a result, what will happen? We will develop a political system that is unstable, because we fought for freedom, but we never achieved equality. So some people translate freedom in terms of the right to govern. So you have a class, a dominant class in Haiti, that is composed of both mulattoes, and it's important that I insist in the color tone, and the blacks. So the blacks and mulattoes privilege, they fight among themselves to know who has the right to rule the rest. That's the first thing. Second, they fight among themselves to know who will the Westerners use as the conduit of Western power. So they'll become the representation of the master in the country. So throughout Haiti's history, until we came to recently to all the movement that happens until we have US occupation, Haiti was a kind of, Haiti has developed an internal colonization using the same resources of the of the people, and the same resources that people put available for everybody, and then resource them for a little go. And around that, you have the Western powers that reinforce these people, particularly when we come to the 20th century with the United States. We have the United States invasion at the beginning of the 20th century. And what they have done, they have reorganized the country. They have reshaped the country, wired the country in a way that we remain totally dependent. So a political class in Haiti will take a political decision only if Washington tells them to take that decision. Okay? And this irrespective of who you are talking to, whether it's black or it is white, whether it's in the left, some of the left, not everybody, but whether it is in the right, certainly in the right. So in Haiti, every single people fighting for power, has a white Westerner behind him or behind her to defend, to intervene whenever they lose power. In the name of human rights, they will intervene to restore exactly the very same people that have been committing the problems. So recently what had happened, since Duvalier regime fell, you had a succession of governments that happened, that emerged in Haiti. And all these successions of government, until we came to Aristide, have been successions of government that was supported by the United States. And when the United States doesn't support you, like it was in the case of Aristide, what they do, they destabilize you and they destroy you. And after Aristide, they organize themselves in order to have United Nations, taking the role of the occupier for reconstruction. Reconstruction was never done. And what the United Nations has done instead, through MINUSTA, was to create puppet governments from Martelly's, the former president before, the one who was killed, and who gave us this one. And all of this with the consent of Washington. All of this with the consent of the United States. So that's the situation we are in.
Now, Professor, you just outlined a whole universe of obstacles in the Haitian people's way, from the assassination of the president, right? You had the dissolution of the legislature. I think you said the Supreme Court justice, he died of COVID recently. You have the global community sort of just continuing to step on Haiti's throat, if you will, keep them suppressed. And then you have the internal fighting among the different classes. So let me ask you, in your opinion, and you know, after this question, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your group, because you are on the ground in Haiti, your group. What needs to happen in Haiti?
What needs to happen in Haiti is a very important question that calls for a realistic approach here, because we have to know who are the players at play. First, the international community is a huge player in this game, because we know as a neo-colonized country and a politics within the nation states, you know, does not happen just because of the wants of those who are in that nation states. So we have to count on international community. What do I mean? I talked about first the United States, because that's the global power, and that's the power that has the capillary power to reach whoever, you know, the US wants to reach. And the US, again, because the US, in one way or another, you know, has leverage in relation, as leverage in the game, in the sense that all groups or parties or institutions in Haiti, you know, in one way or another, they receive their money, their visa, you know, their children go to school in the United States. The United States is the lifeline. So there is no choice on that one. And beside, we have a huge Haitian diaspora, which I will talk about that later. Second, you have also a United Nations. Although United Nations, you know, didn't do what they came to do in Haiti, we have no choice. United Nations is the global institution, you know, that has the legal framework that of which Haiti is a member of. Haiti participated in the construction of this legal framework. So Haiti has the responsibility to guarantee the rights of its citizens, to guarantee the lives of his citizens, and to create space so then his citizens can blossom. So United Nations has coercive power against Haiti, not because of the fact that we are calling for United Nations to tell Haiti what to do, but we are calling on United Nations to reinforce, to help Haiti reinforce the institution for which Haiti signed off for. So United Nations can do things, particularly because they are also on the ground with MINUGIST. You also have, of course, fundamentally, the main actors here are the Haitians themselves. The first, we have those remnants of the government. There is no choice. We have to address the situation immediately. So those who are in power now, regardless if they are illegitimate or not, you know, regardless our political position in relation to them, they are the one controlling the police. They are the one controlling the public administration and so forth and so on. So they are an actor. Second, you have different sectors in the private sectors, including those big, you know, networks of families that are responsible for where the country is at the first place. We have no choice. We have to dialogue with them. Okay. And third, the political parties. The political parties are fragmented in Haiti. You know, you have as many political parties as you have people aspiring for being president. But be that it may, the reality that we have to learn to sit down with those actors. And third, we have the community-based organizations. Most of the things that have been done in Haiti have always been done without Haitians themselves, without community-based organizations, human rights organization, peasants organization, students organization, churches, you know, all those institutions that are vital for the country. Okay, so what I think can happen is for the United Nations to create a conduit. I'm not saying for United Nations to go back to Haiti, because I just told you exactly what happened. If we are expecting United Nations to save Haiti, so Haiti is already dead.
Right.
So we are saying that for the United Nations to use its authority to create the conduit, and the United States to use its power, at least for one time for good in relation to Haiti, to engage Haiti in a different base, not to impose Haiti what he has to do, but to lead Haiti to sit together. We need that. And third, we need those forces also, and those forces that are the forces that we call the Western forces that are friends of Haiti, to be able to provide the support for the Haitian National Police, because we are dealing in Haiti with more than 165 gangs, criminal gangs and political gangs, and all of them are armed. And the police in Haiti is so corrupt and so weak. Those good guys who are in the police, they are not enough. So they need some support, policial support, in order for them to do their work to reinforce the institutions. So those steps are not difficult, but I doubt that they will happen. Why? Because the United States are going to have election in 2 years, in less than 2 years. The Democrats, are very fragile. The position of the Democrats of Biden's in power is very fragile. And Haiti is a hot potato. They don't want to give the Republican ammunition. So then, Haiti can become a problem for them. So up to now, the United States has no strategy in relation to Haiti. Out to the moment I'm talking to you, they have no strategy what to do. But the political courage for the Biden administration to take a stand and then to engage Haiti on a different basis, not sending soldiers in Haiti. We don't want their soldiers. It's not the point here. But we want police. We want to train police. We want to have forces to back up our police officers so then they can dismantle the gangs. But this decision, will it be done? I'm not sure. United Nations also, I don't either. I don't think that will take the decision. And you know why? Because the legacy United Nations left to Haiti is a legacy of cholera with more than 1 million people affected. They have promised that they were going to, give some financial support to the people who were affected. And that was never done, except for little small project that they have put forward. The United Nations didn't take its responsibility. The other problem that the United Nations left us is a bunch of soldiers that let a bunch of pregnant girls, sexual violence and all of these things. But still, again, we have to work with what we have. United Nations has the obligation to force Haiti to reinforce its institutions by using the mini-jus mechanism it has in Haiti, reinforce its objective, reinforce its mandate, so that it can accompany the country, for good. And what are the forces that we have? We have the Haitian diaspora, which is extremely fragmented, but still, Haitian diaspora exists in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, particularly in France. There are a lot of organizations of Haitian diaspora. In this dialogue, we need to engage all those actors in order for Haiti to at least stabilize the situation. And then we can breathe to see how we are going to reimagine the future of the country.